Imagine standing in front of someone who has spent their entire life building a mask, a person who thrives on control, manipulation, and the illusion of superiority. Someone who twists reality so masterfully that even the truth starts to feel like a lie. But what if I told you that there is a way to unmask them? That there is one question, one simple yet devastatingly powerful question that can shake their foundation and force them to reveal who they truly are. There are people in this world who don't live as their true selves. They wear masks, carefully crafted over years of deception, made of charm, confidence, and calculated words. They know exactly what to say, how to act, and when to pull you in. But behind that mask lies something different, something fragile, something desperate. It's not strength that drives them, it's fear. The fear of being seen, the fear of exposure, the fear of losing the power they've spent their entire life building. But here's the thing about masks. They're not real. They may shine in the light, they may look convincing, but they will always crack under pressure. And the moment you stop being mesmerized by the performance and start looking deeper, you begin to see the truth. You begin to recognize the patterns, the lies wrapped in half-truths, the manipulation disguised as concern, the control hidden behind affection. Because for them, relationships are not about love, respect, or understanding. They are about dominance, about winning, about feeding an ego that can never be full. And yet the greatest illusion they create is not about themselves, it's about you. They make you question yourself, they make you doubt your instincts, second guess your worth, and believe that maybe, just maybe, you are the problem, but you are not. That is their game. A game where the rules keep changing, where they always hold the power, and where you are left trying to make sense of the chaos they create. So how do you break free? How do you see through the illusion? You stop playing the game. You stop accepting their words as truth and start watching their actions. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening. And most importantly, you ask the one question that forces them to confront what they fear most: reality. Because the moment you hold up the mirror, the moment you stop reacting and start observing, their mask begins to slip. And when it does, you will see what was always there. Someone who needs to control because they are terrified of losing it. And you, my friend, were never meant to live under someone else's illusion. You were meant to live in your truth, to own your voice, and to walk away from anything that dims your light. Because the most powerful thing you can ever do to someone who builds their world on deception is simply see them for who they are. There are people who walk through life believing they are untouchable, believing they are always a step ahead, always in control. They thrive on the idea that no one can see beyond the image they've built. But what happens when someone does? What happens when, for the first time, they are not admired, feared, or obeyed, but simply seen? That is their greatest fear: not losing an argument, not being proven wrong, but being exposed. Because to be truly seen means to be understood. And to be understood means there's nowhere left to hide. That's the moment the power they hold begins to slip. The moment their carefully built reality starts to crack. They have spent years perfecting their act, wearing confidence like weapons and convincing the world that they are untouchable. But beneath all of it, beneath the charm, the confidence, and the control, there is a deep and terrifying truth. They know they are not who they pretend to be. And so they live in a constant battle, not against you, but against exposure, against the truth. They manipulate not because they are powerful, but because they are afraid. They control not because they are strong, but because they are fragile. Every word, every action, every twisted reality they create is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own fear. The fear that one day someone will look past the surface, past the illusion, and ask the one question they cannot answer honestly. Because the truth is, people who are secure in themselves do not fear being questioned. People who are whole do not fear being understood. But those who build their existence on deception, they will do anything to avoid being truly seen. Because the moment they are, the game is over, and the only thing left is the truth they have been running from all along. There is a trap that many people fall into when dealing with someone who thrives on control and manipulation. The trap is believing that logic will change them, that evidence will make them see reason, that if you just explain yourself one more time, they will finally understand. But that moment never comes, because it was never about understanding. It was never about truth. It was never even about you. It was always about power, about keeping you entangled in a game where the rules shift every time you get too close to winning. You argue, they twist your words. You prove a point, they change the subject. You express hurt, and somehow you end up apologizing. And before you know it, you're exhausted, trying to prove what should already be obvious, trying to win a battle that was designed for you to lose. But here's the truth that will set you free. You don't have to explain, to convince, to fight for clarity in a conversation that was never meant to be fair. Because the moment you step back, the moment you stop reacting, the game starts to fall apart. There is nothing more frustrating to someone who feeds on control than realizing they no longer have control over you. When their words don't shake you, when their manipulation doesn't pull you in, when their power stops working, that is when they start to crumble. Because without your reaction, without your energy fueling their chaos, they are left with nothing but themselves. And that is the one thing they cannot handle. So don't waste your breath trying to prove your worth to someone who only listens to what serves them. Don't fight for fairness in a battle that was never meant to be fair. Instead, ask the one question that forces them to confront what they avoid most: accountability. And when they twist, deflect, and resist, don't chase them. Just watch, because in their reaction and their inability to answer honestly, they will reveal exactly who they are. And in that moment, you will know this was never about you needing to prove anything. This was about them being afraid of the truth finally catching up to them. There are moments in life when you don't need a fight, an argument, or a grand confrontation. Sometimes all it takes is a single question to shake the very foundation someone has built their power on. A question so simple, yet so profound that it forces them to face the one thing they run from the most: the truth. How would you feel if someone did that to you? At first glance, it seems harmless, almost too ordinary to carry any weight, but ask it and watch what happens. Because this question does something they never expected. It forces them to step into someone else's shoes. It demands empathy, self-awareness, and the ability to reflect. And that is exactly why it terrifies them. Because to answer it honestly, they would have to acknowledge the very thing they deny: that their actions cause harm, that their choices have consequences, that the world does not revolve around them. Most people, when confronted with this question, would pause, reflect, and answer with sincerity. but not someone who thrives on control. They will do anything to escape it, laugh it off, mock you, turn it back on you. They might act as if it doesn't matter, as if it's a silly question, as if you're the one being dramatic. But beneath that reaction is something deeper, discomfort, because in that moment, they know that if they were to answer honestly, they would expose themselves, and so they run. They deflect, they dodge. But that's the beauty of this question. You don't need to argue, you don't need to push, you don't need to prove anything. You simply ask and observe, because in their refusal to answer, in their desperate need to escape, they tell you everything you need to know. They reveal that they are incapable of empathy, that accountability is their greatest fear, that fairness is not something they value. And once you see that, once you truly see, you will never again be fooled by their words. You will never again be manipulated into thinking that you are the problem, because the truth was never hidden. It was always there, waiting for the moment when you stopped explaining, stopped justifying, and simply asked the one question that no mask could ever protect them from. Not everyone struggles to answer a simple question. When you ask someone with a kind heart, a clear conscience, and genuine empathy, how would you feel if someone did that to you? They don't hesitate, they don't deflect, they don't get defensive. They pause, they reflect, and they answer with sincerity, because for them accountability isn't a threat, it's a natural part of who they are. But for someone who thrives on control and manipulation, this question is dangerous. It demands something they cannot give: honesty. It forces them to face a reality they have spent their entire life avoiding. And so instead of answering, they react. They might smirk, scoff, dismiss, or even mock the question. They might turn it back on you, twist your words, or claim they have done nothing wrong. But if you watch closely, if you observe instead of engage, you'll notice something deeper: discomfort, a moment of hesitation, a flicker of fear, because deep down they know exactly how they would feel if someone did to them what they do to others. And that truth is unbearable. Their reaction is the answer. It is the proof that words alone could never provide. You don't need a confession, an apology, or a change of heart from them to know what's real. Their avoidance, their defensiveness, their refusal to engage, that is the revelation. That is the moment they expose themselves. And in that moment, something shifts, not for them, but for you. Because once you see through the illusion, once you recognize that their reaction is not a reflection of your worth, but of their inability to face themselves, you take back your power. You stop seeking understanding from someone who refuses to give it. You stop waiting for accountability from someone who fears it. You stop questioning yourself, because the truth has already been spoken, not in their words, but in what they couldn't say. And that truth is enough. It is enough to walk away. It is enough to let go. It is enough to finally free yourself from the weight of someone else's deception. Because real power isn't found in arguing, proving, or convincing. It's found in the ability to see things as they truly are, and choosing once and for all to no longer be a part of their game. Silence is a powerful force. It is not emptiness, nor is it weakness. It is a mirror, reflecting truth in its purest form. When you ask a question that demands honesty, how would you feel if someone did that to you? You don't need to argue, explain, or push for an answer. You simply need to let the silence do the work. Watch what happens when the question lingers in the air. A person with a conscience will engage with it. They may pause, think, even struggle with their emotions, but they will not run from it. They will not fear it. But someone who manipulates, someone who twists reality to suit their own narrative, they will laugh, dismiss, change the subject, or try to make you question why you even asked in the first place. But here's the secret. You don't have to fill the silence for them. You don't have to explain what they already understand deep down. You don't have to justify what they refuse to acknowledge. You don't have to beg them to see the truth when their entire world is built on avoiding it. Instead, you let the quiet stretch between you, because in that space something remarkable happens. They expose themselves, not through their words, but through their resistance, through their discomfort, through their inability to face the simplest question, one that asks them to see themselves the way they so easily judge others. And in that moment, you see the truth, that they are not invincible, that they do not hold as much power as they want you to believe, that their strength was never in who they are, but in how much they could make you doubt yourself. And once you realize this, once you understand that their inability to answer speaks louder than any excuse they could ever give, you no longer need to fight for clarity. And clarity is the first step to freedom. The moment you stop filling the silence for them, the moment you stop trying to explain what they refuse to hear, is the moment you reclaim your power. Because truth does not need to be forced. It does not need to be debated. It only needs to be seen. And once you see it, once you truly see, you will never again be bound by the illusion they worked so hard to create. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They reveal themselves in what is left unsaid. You can spend years searching for explanations, waiting for closure, hoping that one day they will see the damage they've done. But the truth isn't in their words, it's in their inability to face them. Ask the one question that forces them to confront themselves. How would you feel if someone did that to you? And then watch. Watch the hesitation, the discomfort, the deflection. Watch how they twist the conversation to make you feel guilty for even asking. Watch how they evade, deny, or laugh it off as if accountability is beneath them. But most of all, watch what they don't say. Because in their silence, in their refusal to answer, is the truth they don't want you to see. A person with a heart doesn't struggle to recognize another person's pain. They don't need to be cornered into admitting that fairness, respect, and kindness matter. But someone who thrives on control, on shifting blame, on never being held accountable, they cannot answer this question without betraying themselves. To answer honestly would mean acknowledging their actions. To acknowledge their actions would mean taking responsibility. And responsibility is something they will run from at all costs. So they will react, they will make you feel dramatic, unreasonable, even foolish for asking. They will act as if the question itself is the problem, not their actions. But the truth is, their reaction is their confession. Because if they truly believed they had done no harm, if they truly believed they were right, they would have no fear in answering. And once you recognize this, everything changes. You no longer need validation from someone who refuses to give it. You no longer need an apology from someone who doesn't believe they've done anything wrong. You no longer need to keep searching for answers because the answer was always in front of you. in the silence, in the avoidance. But they won't say it. And that's all the proof you need, because someone who cannot recognize the pain they cause will never stop causing it. And once you see that, once you truly accept it, you no longer wait for a different ending. You choose a different path. You walk away, not because you lost, but because you finally won. Because the most powerful thing you can ever do in the presence of someone who cannot face the truth is to no longer need them to. There comes a moment in life when you stop searching for answers outside of yourself, a moment when you realize that truth doesn't always come wrapped in apologies, confessions, or neatly tied endings. Sometimes truth comes in silence, in avoidance, in the way someone refuses to meet your eyes when faced with a question they cannot answer. For too long, you may have thought that if you just explained better, if you just proved your point with more clarity, if you just showed them how much their actions hurt, they would finally understand. But understanding was never the issue. They knew. They always knew. They just never cared enough to admit it. And that realization is painful, but it is also freeing, because it means you were never the problem. It means the battle you were fighting was never about who was right or wrong. It was about who held the power. And the moment you stop chasing validation from someone who thrives on withholding it, you take that power back. You don't need an apology from someone who isn't sorry. You don't need closure from someone who was never open to the truth. You don't need to hear them say, yes, I was wrong, because their reaction already told you everything. Their deflection, their refusal, their inability to answer that one simple question. It was the only answer you ever needed. And so you stop waiting, you stop hoping they will change, stop expecting them to wake up one day and realize what they lost. Instead, you turn your focus inward. You recognize that your value was never theirs to define, that your worth was never tied to their approval, that your peace was never meant to be sacrificed for their comfort. You realize that the most powerful thing you can do isn't to expose them to the world, it's to expose them to yourself, to finally see them not as the person you wished they could be, but as the person they have always shown you they are. And when that moment comes, you do the one thing they never expected. You walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in absolute certainty. Because once you see the truth, once you accept it without excuse or justification, you are free. Free from the need to prove anything, free from the belief that their behavior was ever a reflection of your worth. And in that freedom, you find something more powerful than revenge, more healing than confrontation, more transformative than any words you could ever say to them. You find yourself. And that, more than anything, is the ending you always deserved.